Donut battery is designed differently. It's designed for 100,000 cycles. Now, that's not just better cycle life. That's an entirely different category.
The figure of 100,000 cycles proclaimed by Donut Labs' CEO may sound like a miracle. However, the reality is very simple. No electric vehicle operates for 100,000 real cycles. No known material can withstand 100,000 expansion-contraction events at high energy density. What is being sold here is not a technological breakthrough, but a number carefully optimized to create the illusion of one. So, where does this number actually come from? The first red flag is what we are not told. Donut Lab has never publicly disclosed the depth of discharge at which those 100,000 cycles were measured. There is no data showing whether the battery can achieve this figure at 80% or 100%. The minimum range where a battery has real meaning for electric vehicles. In the battery industry, silence about DOD almost always points to the same conclusion: extremely shallow discharge. This omission alone explains how such a number can exist. Once that context is clear, the mechanism becomes obvious. The only way to reach 100,000 cycles is through microcycling. Instead of deep discharges, the battery oscillates slightly around a fixed state of charge, for example, from 50% down to 49% and back to 50%. Each swing may represent only 1 or 2% of capacity, sometimes even less. On paper, every tiny fluctuation still counts as a cycle. Physically, however, the battery barely experiences any stress. Lithium ions do not penetrate deeply into the electrodes, crystal structures are not significantly stretched, and mechanical strain is close to zero. According to material fatigue theory, as stress amplitude approaches zero, material lifetime approaches infinity. In plain terms, what is being demonstrated is that a battery does not degrade when it is barely used. That kind of cycling has little practical value. Electric vehicles routinely discharge 60 to 80% of their capacity per day. Industrial robots and humanoid robots may undergo multiple deep discharges within a single work shift. In those applications, the meaningful metric is a few thousand cycles at high DOD, not 100,000 cycles at a 1% swing. The latter looks impressive on presentation slides, but it has no relevance on highways or factory floors. The problem runs even deeper. The 100,000 cycle claim has never been fully validated in real time. Even under the most optimistic assumptions, 1 cycle per hour, operating continuously 24/7, it would take more than 11 years to collect genuine data. Donut Lab simply has not existed long enough to prove this. What is far more likely is a familiar industry shortcut: testing a few thousand cycles under ideal laboratory conditions, stable temperature, low current, then extrapolating the degradation curve out to 100,000. But batteries do not age linearly. Every battery engineer knows the concept of the knee point, the moment when degradation suddenly accelerates. Before this point, the battery appears healthy. After it, capacity drops rapidly, internal resistance spikes, and failure can occur abruptly. For solid-state batteries, the risk is even greater. Ceramic electrolytes are brittle. Microcracks, loss of ionic contact, or dendrites penetrating the electrolyte can develop silently, without warning. That knee point never appears in marketing charts, because once it does, the entire 100,000 cycle narrative collapses. No one knows whether Donut Lab tested the battery until failure, or stopped just before that critical moment. The largest contradiction, however, lies in the simultaneous promise of extreme durability and ultra-fast charging. In battery physics, these two goals are natural enemies. Charging in minutes implies very high C rates, large currents, chaotic ion motion, heat generation, and increased dendrite risk. Long cycle life, by contrast, requires gentle charging, often limited to 0.1 to 0.5 C in laboratory conditions. What is actually happening is clear. Cycle life is measured on a battery raised in a glass cage, while fast charging performance belongs to a different cell entirely. Merging these attributes into a single specification sheet describes a product that does not exist in the real world. At this point, the CEO's phrase, "an entirely different category," deserves to be reinterpreted. there is a class of energy storage systems that routinely achieves hundreds of thousands of cycles: capacitors, supercapacitors, and hybrid capacitor systems. They are extremely durable because they store energy electrostatically without deep ion insertion reactions. The trade-off is unavoidable: very low energy density. To achieve that kind of durability, the anode must use materials with minimal expansion, such as lithium titanate. LTO delivers roughly 80 watt-hours per kilogram, compared to 250 to 270 watt-hours per kilogram for Tesla's NMC cells. In practical terms, reaching 100,000 cycles means carrying 2 to 3 times more battery mass for the same driving range. The 100,000 cycle figure is not fabricated. It can be real under microcycling, low current, ideal temperature, and low energy density. But when that number is placed in the context of electric vehicles, robots, or long-range mobility systems, it becomes deeply misleading. Over the next 2 to 3 years, that unanswered question will become increasingly difficult to avoid. As the technology moves, if it moves at all, beyond controlled demonstrations and into real operating environments, the trade-offs hidden behind the cycle life claim will surface rapidly. Energy density, usable depth of discharge, charging power limits, mechanical compression requirements, thermal stability, and manufacturing yield cannot all remain abstract variables once volume production is attempted. Each compromise will leave measurable fingerprints in real-world data: shortened range, restricted power output, accelerated degradation under fast charging, or costs that scale far faster than revenue. In this time frame, serious customers will stop asking for headline numbers and start demanding independent test reports, degradation curves, and failure statistics under standardized conditions. If those documents do not materialize, the technology risks being quietly reclassified, not as an EV battery breakthrough, but as a niche energy storage solution optimized for laboratory longevity rather than practical utility. Conversely, if transparent data does emerge, it may reveal a battery that excels in narrow, low-stress applications while remaining fundamentally unsuitable for mass-market vehicles. Either outcome reframes the narrative. The next few years will not decide whether the 100,000 cycle claim is impressive. They will decide whether it was relevant at all.